Good morning. Welcome to the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the water well and industrial drilling industry. Episode 14 is brought to you by TDH Manufacturing. TDH pump hoists are built to work as hard as you do, made with the latest technologies to deliver the power and precise handling required on today's job sites. TDH will provide superior performance and unmatched versatility day in and day out. It is excellent to have our first advertiser as a great innovator of our industry. I'm your host, Brock Yordy. This week in the news, we'll cover the first Waters of the United States Roundtables. Our main story this week is an interview with Robert Meyer of Talon LPE. We discuss entering the drilling industry after his service as a United States Marine and Iraq veteran. Robert talks about the expectations of hiring a veteran. But before we get into all this great news, let's talk safety. For our safety topic of the week, it is National Trailer Safety Month, which is the first week of June. We have a lot of different sizes of trucks, trailers. We move tooling, tools, casing, and equipment. So let's take 3 minutes and go walk around our equipment out in the yard, see how it looks. Let's start by checking our trucks, doing our DOT inspections, taking a look, trusting what our CDL drivers say, as this is a secure load, or I'm not comfortable riding with this truck the way it is. Trust our spidey sense. And then I start thinking about when I'm loading out, what bugs me the most or gets me thinking with my spidey senses, loading and unloading pipe, casing, drill rod. How am I handling this? How am I lifting it? How am I lowering it? How am I moving it on that flatbed? How am I restraining it? These loads are dangerous, and we need to make sure they're balanced. We need to make sure we know the weight. We need to make sure we're using wedges or chocks. Are we making a pyramid load? Are we loading out on top and taking that 1,000 feet of drill ride out to that job site? The big thing is the weight of the load, making sure it's balanced, understanding where we're loading and unloading at the shop and when we get to that job site. What does our weather look like? Is it icy? Is it snowing? Is in a tight street, and we're going to have a flagger so that we can make sure we're able to load and unload effectively. Who is our qualified individual that's running this equipment? Are they our competent person? How are we looking at our rigging? And what piece of equipment are we using to load and unload? A few years ago, there was an incident where a caisson rig was being used to unload pallets off a flatbed and a man was killed. That was the wrong piece of equipment for that. What do our tie downs look like? Is everything damaged? Is there something we need to get rid of? These loads with drill rod and casing and whatnot are stored energy. We need to make sure we can effectively load and unload them. And then when we get to the job site, do we have the right equipment and the right process to be able to unload effectively? I know we've blown through this quickly and we're a very tribal industry, but this is the best time for us to be going to 29 CFR 1926 subpart H, material handling, storage, use, and disposal. Or 1926 subpart N, cranes, derricks, hoists, elevators, conveyors. And finally, 1926 subpart O, motor vehicles, mechanized equipment, and marine operations. Remember, you have to be 18 years of age to run a forklift. We need to make sure everybody's qualified at what they're doing and that we're securing these loads appropriately. And if that spidey sense starts tingling and something doesn't seem right, let's say stop. And this week in the news that I believe is affecting us the most, we're going back to the Waters of the United States roundtables. The first 3 have been completed by the EPA and the Army, and roundtable number 4 happens this evening, June 6th, 4 p.m. to 6:30. It's held by the Kansas Livestock Association. If you remember in episode 2 of the Driller Newscast, we discussed Kansas Livestock Association along with Farm Bureau's involvement in preventing stronger legislation on water withdrawal for the Ogallala. Right now, 30% of the private water wells in the state of Kansas are impacted by the withdrawal of the Ogallala. And you're probably thinking right now, why are we talking about groundwater when this is waters of the United States? But with all the legal doctrine we're seeing and what's happening along with these roundtables, we're interconnected and we all need to be discussing it that way. You can find tonight's live stream at epa.gov/WOTUS/public outreach. The first two live streams had pretty big pushback by the agricultural industry, with the first one having been questioned by the American Farm Bureau Federation on credibility and legitimacy of the roundtable's selection for participants. Courtney Briggs, American Farm Bureau Federation Senior Director of Government Affairs, stated, "We are very disappointed. First, I think the credibility of the roundtable was hurt by the lack of any mainstream agricultural representatives at the meeting. Additionally, there was really no meaningful discussion of law. So EPA can only make an informed decision if it seeks out and listens to all viewpoints. And we share the goal of clean water that was expressed by many of the participants, but farmers and ranchers need clear rules, and this roundtable failed to address how both of these goals can be achieved." The first roundtable had a great cross-section of individuals, from farmers to wastewater regulators to people in the city of Detroit and Cleveland and scientists. There was plenty of discussion that went beyond just farming. And as we look at the waters of the United States, we have to understand that 80% of our infrastructure for most of our major cities was already established before the 1972 Clean Water Act. And we have massive, what we used to call 100-year storms that now we're calling 1,000-year storms, that are impacting the amount of runoff we have and the accountability that we need for these situations. And the first roundtable 100% dived right into climate change and then how downstream affected cities, especially underrepresented cities, are impacted by these pollutants and these waters and how we're handling this. Roundtable 2 had plenty of farmers and lots to say, and we will get into that in another discussion after we hear what happens in Kansas in the Mid-Con with the one that's going to happen tonight. So when we consider who's being represented in these roundtables, this is how it was broken down. Last July 30th, the agency announced stakeholder engagement opportunities, including the agency's intent to host 10 regionally focused roundtables. On October 13th, 2021, the EPA and the Army announced a process for stakeholders to submit nomination letters for a slate of nominees to potentially be selected for one of these geographically focused roundtables. In response to the robust interest in these regional roundtables, the agency extended the deadline for submissions to December 1st, 2021. Everybody has the opportunity to be represented. And we've talked about irrigation, and we've talked about how important the farming industry and community is in feeding not only the United States, but our planet. The first roundtable, 100% discussed Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis. Talked a lot about the Great Lakes and the protection there. The second one dived deep into farming, into the mid-continent, represented by Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Indiana. We have 6 more of these roundtables to go, with this evening being the Kansas Livestock Association's opportunity and how it's represented and the discussions. You should all be watching these live streams and learning how we're being represented in the water industry, from groundwater and surface water, and how they're all interconnected. our main story, featured industry professional for the week, Robert Meyer with Talon LPE. He is a veteran of the Iraq War, United States Marine, and we get into talking about hiring veterans and the importance of our industry embracing as many of these men and women as possible, hiring heroes, helmets to hard hats. There are right now 200,000 veterans that are transitioning from the military back to the private sector. And as we look at the Bureau of Labor statistics, only about 7% of our entire working population for the United States is veterans. And of that, for the construction industry, it's a much smaller percentage. We know these great men and women are capable of drilling and road building and being part of everything that is our infrastructure law, working on green energy, working in construction, and we need them. So a great conversation I had with Robert Meyer.
Thanks, Brock. My name is Robert Meyer. I work for a company called Talon LPE and headquartered in Amarillo, Texas, and I manage our drilling department.
Rob, how did drilling get into your blood?
Well, like most of us, I kind of fell into it. When I got out of the military, I didn't really have a whole lot of plans. Started interviewing for jobs and ended up in the environmental drilling industry as the first job offer that came in. And my wife at the time, she was not my wife. And I said, hey, they want me to move to Colorado or California. And we decided California. And so that's kind of where it all started, working on smaller probe rigs, doing environmental remediation and, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 site assessments and all that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of grown from there, much bigger rigs, much bigger projects. But it all started on I think the first rig I ever ran was a Geoprobe 6600 in the back of a box truck. So,
what is one big lesson you've learned that you'd like to share from being on a job site?
Complacency. It's easy to get complacent. October 31st, 2013, I crushed my hand on a Geoprobe machine that, there's one of those deals where the manufacturer had identified a design flaw and had sent out instructions to everybody to correct it. And this one was kind of halfway corrected, and I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing. And I have a scar on my hand to prove it. Can't really see it that well, but and it was, it was one of those situations where it was Halloween and everybody wanted to get out of there because half the crew had kids and wanted to go trick-or-treating. And, it was the last day of a project. We were wrapping it up. And I was just, at that time, I was managing that office as the operations manager. And I went out to the field to help the guys wrap up. And I said, I'll hop on a rig and start pulling tools. And so, hazard identification number one, started running a rig, and that's not what I do every day. And I didn't take 10 or 15 minutes to say, hey, what's up with this machine? What do I need to be aware of? And I didn't set it up properly the first time. And so anyway, it's just complacency is the biggest killer. We see it every year. We see another, somebody pulling a pump too close to a power line, somebody not masking down because, it's just 10 feet more or whatever. And, something goes wrong because they were trying to take a shortcut or do something quickly like I was doing. And, that 5 minute save turned into no time saved at all, some time in the hospital, surgery, all that stuff. So complacency is the biggest concern that I have for our crews every day.
So my next question, last week was Memorial Day, and we honored all of those who, gave all. and you're a veteran of the Iraq War, United States Marine. We got a lot of great Marines that are in our industry, along with Army and Air Force, and even some Navy guys. How did you make the transition from the military into drilling, and what could there have been a smoother way for that to happen?
I think that transition was pretty easy for me. The company that I hired into is, at the time that I got hired, we had 45 employees, and 75% of them were Marine veterans. And so they already had it all figured out for me. Now, there are some issues with how I transitioned out of the Marine Corps. That's more on the Marine Corps side of things that they have fixed. My age group, it was kind of on the downhill side of a big expansion and then subsequent reduction in force. And so there were a lot of people getting out, and similar thing with complacency. I think that a lot of the outbound processes, some of those folks got complacent, just process them out. And that's, I think, largely been remedied. That we could do a whole hour-long thing of just the inbound, outbound processes. But I think it was made pretty easy by those that I had around me. The employee number one of that company that I started with was a Marine CH-46 crew chief, and all of the next 3 or 4 were all guys that were in his unit with him. And so it's like from the top down, everybody understood. And so it was pretty easy for me.
That seems to be the big discussion right now as we're trying to hire more good men and women into industries. We need to hire veterans. Do you have any advice for other companies that are, looking to hire some heroes?
Yeah, so the SkillBridge program that has come up recently is an interesting one. I think I get frustrated by it because the DoD fast tracks all these companies that invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into the SkillBridge programs. And the way that it is portrayed when you're getting out of the military is the only way to go into trades is through a SkillBridge program. And that's not accurate. The only way to go into a trade with a company that's large and has a lot of money is through the SkillBridge program. I think that there are many other means to be able to find a good home. And for the companies, really, I think that right now should be the easiest time ever with social media to reach these individuals. But at the same time, with all of the cybersecurity stuff that's going on, a lot of social media interaction with service members is very careful. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have to be careful about how and when and who and all of that. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to getting in front of people and telling them what the company's all about. And as you said, everybody wants to hire veterans, and it's created this weird attitude, in my opinion, of that's kind of generational that we all experience with some folks in the younger generation that are still getting their feet wet. And there's somewhat of a sense of entitlement. Well, I'm a veteran and I've done this for my country, and now, you should do this and that. And, it's an uncomfortable topic that nobody likes to talk about, because as a civilian, you don't want to say it because then you just don't understand. And as a veteran, you're careful about saying it because you don't want to turn people off to veterans to hire them. But all of that being said, there are a lot of qualities and a lot of maturity that is gained in those 3 to 6 years that other folks just don't have the same experiences to share and achieve that personal growth. And so there is a lot of value. But the other thing is that companies need to understand that when somebody gets out of the military, their first 2 or 3 years, they're just trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do with their life. And, to have this expectation that you're going to hire somebody out of the military and they're going to be your next career guy, I mean, That's unreasonable. Um, it, there's when I got hired, there was this disdain that I heard a lot for, don't use this as a stepping stone. Why not? If I can give 2 years of my help to you, why can't I use this as a stepping stone? And I think by and large, even outside of that hiring group, the veteran group, I think that companies today need to be more comfortable with the idea that it might just be a stepping stone, regardless of who the employee is. And that's okay. So I don't know if that's really helpful, but I see a lot of, especially in the drilling industry, a lot of, we want you to be our next career driller, and da 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 da. And that's great that you want that. But this guy doesn't even, or this girl doesn't even know what this industry is about. And you're throwing this, you want them to be a career hire at them in the first week. I mean, chill out with all that.
No, that's excellent. You made two great points there about, we are a different generation now that you're going to have multiple jobs in a lifetime because of the experience and the growth and the opportunities. But the bigger piece, that deployment and the stakes, heck yeah, there's a level of maturity that increases much faster.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was discussing a life perspective with somebody the other day, and I was talking about how, my deployment to Iraq wasn't really anything to write home about from, combat exposure or anything like that. We did a civil affairs mission, which was cool in its own right. We were building schools and water treatment facilities and power distribution facilities and all of this stuff. But at the same time, there's a certain level of risk acceptance that you have to, if you're honest with yourself, make before you go to one of these faraway places. And just because you're not going to an Iraq or an Afghanistan doesn't make the risks any less. I mean, there are people all over the world that don't like us. We see it in Africa. We saw it in Africa last year, and things have gotten really weird in Africa, and the U.S. does a lot in Africa. And I would agree with you. There's a level of risk acceptance that never really leaves you, and viewing risks differently. Like, yeah, it's risky, but that's nothing compared to whatever. And so when you talk about projects and drilling and risks of what if we lose this hole? What if we do? We'll deal with it. We'll call Brock and say, Brock, we're in trouble. I need your help. There's a lot of resources available to us. Well, what if we do? We aren't going to find out if we will until we start. So how about we start first, and then from there we'll figure it out. It's all good.
That's a great point. And when I get to work with the Army or the Air Force, just the way you say, what if we do? The same, I have this insane, in the back of my head thinking, do we have all the recommendations and all the plans in place? Because we can't just run back to the shop in Amarillo and grab a couple extra cans of polymer. Now somebody's getting in an MRAP, or we're having a supply drop, or there's a lot of logistics that go in, but then those stakes again of, what could happen between here and there for not having an extra 15 gallons of, clay inhibitor. So
yeah, no, I agree. It makes a $400 jug of polymer than $100,000 jug of polymer that you're asking somebody to, asking a commanding officer to make a risk decision that it's worth it. So it's definitely a tough situation, different stakes, different circumstances, but.
I completely agree. Well, I want to thank you for coming on today and dropping some knowledge and talking about veterans in the industry and life experience. If you would like to be part of the industry professional featured on the Driller Newscast, email me questions@askbrock.com. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You too. And this wraps episode 14 of the Driller Newscast. I want to thank our first advertiser, TDH Manufacturing. When we came up with this idea of a weekly newscast, it was to deliver relevant latest news as it's happening. And I believe TDH does the same thing while they listen to their customers, have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry, and innovating and delivering the latest technology. It's excellent to have you as our advertiser. Thank you. I also want to thank Robert Meyer and all the great insight he gave us into entering the drilling industry as a veteran, the expectations of what it is to hire a veteran, and understanding that there's just a lot happening. And these men and women, as they've served our country, are now navigating what they want to do with their future career. Check out the Waters of the United States Roundtable live streams. We need to be paying attention to who's advocating for water and how, and make sure we're communicating with our state associations and the National Association. Everybody be safe. Have a great week. Thank you.